Before temples, before scriptures, before gods had names, humans were already looking at the sky with questions they could not answer. Imagine a world with no science, no history, no explanations, only fear, wonder, and survival. Thunder roared without warning, the sun disappeared every night. Death came suddenly, and nature decided who lived and who didn't. In this silent and dangerous world, the human mind did something extraordinary. It began to imagine the divine. Early humans did not wake up one day and decide to invent gods. The first gods were not created out of philosophy, but out of necessity. Life was fragile, unpredictable, and often brutal. A single storm could destroy food supplies. A wild animal could end a life in seconds. Disease arrived without explanation. When humans could not control their environment, they tried to understand it. And when understanding failed, belief took its place. The earliest evidence of divine imagination did not appear in temples or written texts, but in caves, burial sites, and simple tools. Archaeologists have found graves over 100,000 years old, where bodies were carefully placed, sometimes with flowers, weapons, or food. These were not random actions. They suggest that even the earliest humans believed death was not the end. Something continued beyond the visible world. And if something continued, then something unseen must exist to govern it. Fear played a central role in shaping the first gods. Humans feared darkness because predators hunted at night. They feared storms because lightning killed without warning. They feared the sea, fire, and disease. Over time, fear transformed into meaning. Thunder was no longer random noise. It became a sign of an angry presence. Fire was no longer just destruction. It became sacred and powerful. Nature itself slowly took on personality. This is where the earliest gods were born, not as human-like figures, but as forces. The wind was alive, the river listened, the forest watched. Early humans practiced what scholars later called animism, the belief that everything in nature has a spirit. A rock was not just a rock. A tree was not just a tree. Everything had intention, emotion, and power. To survive, humans believed they had to respect these unseen forces. As human imagination evolved, these spirits became more defined. A dangerous river slowly transformed into a river spirit. A life-giving sun became a powerful being that demanded respect. The moon, controlling time and tides, became mysterious and divine. Humans began to see patterns in nature and assigned those patterns meaning. When the sun returned after winter, it felt like rebirth. When crops grew after rain, it felt like a blessing. Rituals emerged as a way to communicate with these imagined forces. Early humans danced, painted their bodies, sang chants, and made offerings. These acts were not symbolic entertainment, they were survival strategies. If the spirits controlled nature, then pleasing them could mean life instead of death. Rituals created a sense of control in a world that otherwise felt uncontrollable. Over generations, stories began to form. Humans explained the world through narrative because stories made fear understandable. A storm was no longer chaos, it was the action of a powerful being. Death was no longer meaningless, it was a journey to another realm. These stories were shared around fires, passed from elders to children and slowly refined. With every retelling, the unseen became more structured. As societies grew, gods began to resemble humans. This was not accidental. Humans understood themselves better than nature, so they projected human qualities onto the divine. The first gods felt anger, jealousy, love, and mercy. They punished disobedience and rewarded loyalty. This made them relatable and frightening. A god that thinks like a human can be negotiated with, feared, or pleased. Different environments produced different gods. In harsh deserts, gods were often strict and powerful. In fertile lands, gods were generous and nurturing. In coastal regions, sea gods controlled life and death. The divine imagination adapted to geography, climate, and lifestyle. There was no single first god. There were many, shaped by the world that created them. Shamans emerged as intermediaries between humans and the unseen. These individuals were believed to communicate with spirits, travel between worlds, and interpret signs. Shamans used trance, music, and altered states of consciousness to access the divine. To early societies, these experiences felt real. The visions, dreams, and voices were evidence that the unseen world truly existed. Dreams themselves played a powerful role in shaping belief. Early humans did not understand the brain or psychology. When they dreamt of dead relatives or strange beings, they believed these encounters were real. Dreams became another doorway to the divine. If the dead could appear in dreams, then death was not the end. If strange beings spoke in visions, then gods were communicating. Over time, gods became protectors of tribes and communities. Each group believed their survival depended on their relationship with their gods. Victories in war were seen as divine favor. Defeats were seen as punishment. This belief system strengthened group identity. To believe in the same gods was to belong. Religion became a powerful social glue. The first gods were not distant rulers of the universe. They were close, emotional, and deeply involved in daily life. They lived in storms, animals, mountains, and dreams. Humans spoke to them, feared them, and depended on them. The divine was not somewhere far away, it was everywhere. As human language developed, gods gained names. Naming gave power and clarity. A named god could be praised, blamed, or remembered. With names came myths, stories explaining creation, destruction, love, and betrayal. These early myths were not meant to be factual histories. They were emotional truths. They made life meaningful. They explained suffering without science. They offered hope when reality was cruel. In a world where survival was uncertain, belief offered stability. As populations increased and societies became more complex, gods also became more organized. Different gods controlled different aspects of life: fertility, war, harvest, death. This specialization reflected human society itself. Just as communities had hunters, healers, and leaders, the divine world mirrored human structure. Powerful leaders soon realized the influence of divine belief. If God supported a ruler, then obedience became sacred. The line between divine authority and human authority began to blur. Gods were no longer just imagined forces, they became tools of order and control. Belief shaped law, morality, and social hierarchy. Yet at its core, the origin of gods was deeply human. Gods were mirrors reflecting human fears, hopes, and questions. They were born from the need to survive, to understand, and to belong. The divine imagination was not weakness, it was creativity responding to an unforgiving world. Even today, traces of the first gods remain. We still speak of nature as angry or kind. We still search for meaning in suffering. We still ask the same questions early humans asked under the same sky. The forms of belief have changed, but the human need behind them remains. As gods became more defined in human imagination, they slowly moved from being everywhere to living in specific places. Mountains became sacred homes. Rivers became divine paths. Certain trees, caves, and stones were no longer ordinary. They were gateways. Humans believed these locations were closer to the unseen world, where the divine presence felt stronger. Visiting such places was not casual. It required preparation, respect, and ritual. Offerings became an essential way to maintain balance between humans and gods. Early people offered food, animals, and sometimes valuable objects. These offerings were not sacrifices in the modern sense, but exchanges. Humans gave something precious in return for protection, rain, fertility, or victory. This idea of exchange made the divine relationship practical and understandable. If humans did their part, the gods would do theirs. Over time, the divine world became more structured than the human one. Gods were ranked by power. Some ruled the sky, others the earth or the underworld. Some created life, others destroyed it. This hierarchy reflected human societies, which were also becoming more organized. As tribes grew into settlements and settlements into early cities, belief systems adapted to support order and stability. The idea of creation became central to divine imagination. Humans wanted to know where everything began. Creation myths explained how the world, animals, and humans came into existence. Often, the first gods were creators who shaped the world from chaos. These stories gave people a sense of purpose. If the gods created the world, then human life had meaning within a larger design. Death remained one of the strongest forces shaping belief. Early humans could accept hunger, pain, and fear, but death raised questions that demanded answers. What happens when life ends? Where did the dead go? Gods became guardians of the afterlife. Some were gentle guides, others terrifying judges. The fear of death transformed into structured belief systems about reward, punishment, and continuation. Ancestor worship emerged alongside belief in gods. Early humans believed their dead relatives did not disappear, but became powerful spirits. These ancestors could protect the living or punish disrespect. Over time, the line between ancestor spirits and gods blurred. Some gods may have originally been legendary ancestors whose stories grew larger with time. As storytelling evolved, gods became more complex characters. They had relationships, conflicts, and histories. Gods fought each other, fell in love, made mistakes, and learned lessons. These divine stories reflected human emotions and struggles. By watching gods face conflict, humans understood their own lives better. Mythology became a way to explore morality, justice, loyalty, and betrayal. Symbols became crucial in representing the divine. Early humans could not always describe gods in words, so they used images and symbols. The sun, animals, geometric shapes, and natural elements became sacred signs. These symbols were powerful because they could be shared without language. A symbol could unite a group and represent belief without explanation. Animals played a special role in divine imagination. Early gods were animal-like, or part animal, part human. This was not random. Animals were stronger, faster and more connected to nature than humans. By associating gods with animals, humans acknowledged the power they lacked. A god with the strength of a lion or the vision of an eagle felt believable and terrifying. As belief systems matured, moral behavior became linked to divine approval. Gods did not just control nature, they judged human actions. Kindness, honesty, loyalty, and bravery were rewarded. Violence, betrayal, and disrespect were punished. This transformed gods into moral authorities. Fear of divine punishment helped maintain social order long before written laws existed. Time also became sacred. Seasons, cycles, and celestial movements were seen as divine patterns. The rising and setting of the sun, the phases of the moon, and the changing of seasons were linked to God's actions. Festivals and rituals were timed to these cycles. By following sacred time, humans felt connected to the divine rhythm of the universe. As communication improved, beliefs spread between groups. Trade, migration, and conflict allowed gods to travel. One tribe's god merged with another's. Some gods were absorbed, renamed, or transformed. This blending created richer and more complex belief systems. The divine world became diverse, reflecting human interaction and exchange. Eventually, some gods became universal while others remained local. Local gods protected villages or regions, while greater gods ruled over entire civilizations. This shift mirrored political change. As kings ruled larger territories, gods also ruled wider domains. Divine authority supported political power, and political power reinforced divine belief. Writing changed everything. Once humans began recording myths, gods became fixed. Stories that were once flexible became sacred texts. This gave belief permanence and authority. Written gods were harder to change, question, or forget. The divine imagination entered a new phase where belief could spread across generations unchanged. Yet, even as gods became formalized, their origins remained deeply human. Fear, curiosity, love, and hope were still at the center. Humans did not stop imagining the divine, they refined it. Gods became answers to deeper questions about existence, justice, and meaning. Belief systems became philosophies, laws, and identities. The first gods were not mistakes or illusions. They were responses to a world that demanded explanation. They gave courage in uncertainty and order in chaos. Through gods, humans found ways to face nature, death, and each other. The divine imagination was a survival tool as powerful as fire or language. Even today, modern belief systems carry echoes of the first gods. Sacred places, rituals, moral laws, and creation stories still exist in new forms. The names have changed, the structures have evolved, but the foundation remains. Humans continue to search for meaning beyond the visible world, using belief to navigate existence.